I was told I was dying. The doctor didn't even try to soften it. His eyes said everything before his mouth did. Words like, "Little time left. Prepare your family. Nothing more we can do." They've been echoing in my head ever since. I lay there in that hospital bed, surrounded by wires and machines that beeped like reminders of my weakness. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Every breath burned. Every second felt stolen. My family stood at my bedside, whispering prayers. I could hear my brother's voice, trembling, reciting words I'd heard 1,000 times before. My mother's lips moved silently, clutching her beads, her eyes red from nights without sleep. But me, I just stared at the ceiling, empty, bitter. I couldn't bring myself to join them. I didn't believe anymore. To me, prayer was useless noise, a whisper into nothing. I remember snapping at them, "Stop wasting your breath. Nothing's going to change." The look on their faces, the pain I caused with that one sentence should have cut me. But my heart was too hard, too proud. And yet, when the room went quiet, when the nurses left and the lights dimmed, I could feel it, the heaviness of my own emptiness pressing down on me, the loneliness of dying without hope. I told myself I was ready, but I wasn't, not even close. And that's when it began, the first crack in the wall I had built around myself. Because in my darkest night, something happened I still struggle to explain. I wasn't always like this. There was a time, when I was young, when I prayed with sincerity. I remember kneeling beside my father, his voice steady, mine trembling, as we whispered words of faith together. Back then, I believed. I really did. But life has a way of breaking belief. When I was a teenager, my father got sick. I prayed harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. Night after night, I begged God to heal him. And yet one morning, I woke up to find him gone. No miracle, no healing, just silence. That silence stayed with me. It grew louder every year. Then came more losses. Friends taken in accidents. Doors that never opened, no matter how hard I tried. Nights when I cried out and heard nothing in return. With every unanswered prayer, something inside me hardened. I began to tell myself, faith is a crutch for the weak. A way for people to lie to themselves. I wore that thought like armor. I mocked those who prayed. I laughed at people who said God had helped them. I even threw bitter words at my own mother when she tried to comfort me with her faith. If God cared, he wouldn't have taken everything from us, I told her once. I'll never forget how her eyes filled with tears, not because of my words, but because she knew how broken I had become. I pushed faith out of my life completely. Instead, I filled the emptiness with pride. Pride in being stronger, in not needing God. But the truth? Deep down, I was just scared. Scared of trusting again. Scared of being disappointed again. And now, lying in that hospital bed, with machines beeping out the rhythm of my last days, I couldn't help but think of all those years I had ridiculed others for holding on to hope. The guilt stung sharper than the pain in my body, because as my family prayed for me, I couldn't pray for myself. I had thrown away the very thing they clung to and left them watching me die without it. That night, I whispered to myself, what if I was wrong? And that's when the silence I had known for so long began to change. The nights were the hardest. Daytime at least brought noise, nurses moving from room to room, doctors checking charts, my family hovering over me, whispering prayers I refused to echo. But when night came, the silence grew thick, pressing against my chest, heavier than the illness itself. I would drift in and out of shallow sleep, my mind circling the same bitter thoughts. Every time I closed my eyes, memories of what I had lost came flooding back. My father's last breath, the doors that closed in my face when I needed them open, the countless prayers I had whispered into darkness unanswered. Each memory felt like another chain wrapping around my heart. The bitterness was heavy, heavier than the IV tubes, heavier than the beeping machines. It clung to me like shackles. I told myself I was strong because I no longer begged for miracles. But the truth? I was weak. I was terrified. I was dying. And I was dying without peace. I could hear my family in their chairs at the corner of the room, some drifting into uneasy sleep, some still mumbling quiet prayers. My daughter's tiny voice carried even through the hum of machines. "Please, Baba, don't give up." She hears us. Her words cut me sharper than any needle. She'd, so young, so innocent, still believed someone was listening. And I, her father, could only lie here in silence, too proud, too broken, to join her. That guilt was another chain. Hours dragged by. The clock on the wall glowed faintly in the dim light. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock, then 2. Every breath I took felt like it could be my last, and somewhere between waking and sleeping, I realized I was afraid of closing my eyes, afraid I wouldn't open them again. I stared at the ceiling, forcing myself to stay awake, but the fatigue was relentless. I slipped into restless dreams, dark, heavy, suffocating. Dreams where I walked alone through empty streets, calling out, and no one answered. Dreams where I saw faces of those I had lost, turning away from me in silence. Each time I jerked awake, gasping. The bitterness dug deeper. See, even in dreams, no one comes. But then came that night, the night I can't explain. The clock read 3:33 a.m. when I opened my eyes. At first, I thought it was just another restless awakening. But almost immediately, I knew something was different. The room was still, unnaturally still. The usual hum of machines seemed muted. The faint snores of my brother in the chair were gone. Even the ticking clock felt slower. And the air was heavy, but not in the way of sickness. It was thick, pressing, like the whole world had paused to take a breath. I tried to shift in my bed, but my body froze. My heart pounded in my chest, faster, harder, not from fear alone, but from something I couldn't name. My throat was dry, yet I managed to whisper, "What is happening?" That's when I noticed it. The smell. Hospitals are filled with the stench of bleach, chemicals, and sickness. But suddenly, that smell was gone. In its place was something so out of place, so impossible, it made my eyes sting. Roses. A fragrance of roses, soft yet overwhelming, filling the entire room. I thought for a moment I was hallucinating, that the medication was playing tricks on me. But the smell grew stronger, sweeter, and it wrapped around me like a blanket. My chest loosened. My breathing slowed. I turned my head toward the corner of the room, and that's when I saw it, or thought I saw it. The shadows weren't shadows anymore. They shimmered faintly, like a glow hidden behind a curtain. Not bright, not blinding, but soft, like moonlight filtered through leaves. My skin prickled. My body trembled. The chains of bitterness I had carried for decades suddenly felt brittle, as though they could break with a single touch. I whispered it before I even realized the words were leaving my mouth. I knew someone was there, and in that moment, the silence of the hospital room didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive, waiting, watching. I closed my eyes tight, shaking, my mind racing. This isn't real. It can't be real. You're imagining things. It's the medicine, the lack of sleep, the fever. That's all it is. But when I opened them again, the glow hadn't faded. The roses hadn't disappeared. I could hear the faint sound of my daughter breathing softly in her chair, completely undisturbed. The machines still beeped their steady rhythm, but even they sounded different now, like background music to something greater. Fear and wonder clashed inside me. For the first time in decades, I felt small. Not small in defeat, but small in awe. The bitterness that had chained me for so long trembled, ready to fall. And I knew, deep in my bones, deeper than reason or pride, I was not alone. I don't know if I was awake or dreaming. Even now, I can't tell you for certain. All I know is that at 3:33 a.m., something happened that tore through every wall I had built around myself. The glow in the corner of the room grew brighter, not sudden, not blinding, but gentle, like dawn rising behind a veil. The fragrance of roses swelled until it was all I could breathe. And then, the air itself seemed to bend. I turned my head, slowly, afraid of what I might see. My body trembled. My throat was dry. But there she was. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A woman stood there. She wasn't towering or terrifying. She wasn't wrapped in fire or thunder. No, she was simple, human almost, yet more than human. Her robe was pale, flowing like water, and over her shoulders was a mantle of blue, soft as the evening sky. Her head was slightly bowed, her hands open, as though inviting, not demanding. Light clung to her, not harsh, not artificial, but alive. And her eyes met mine. They were dark, deep, endless, but not like abysses. They were oceans of compassion. They didn't pierce me like swords. They held me like a mother holds a child who has done wrong, not to condemn, but to call back home. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. For the first time in decades, I felt completely undone. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Those eyes pinned me, not in judgment, but in mercy. Mercy I didn't deserve. Mercy I hadn't asked for. Mercy I had spent years mocking. And then she spoke, not loud, not booming. Her voice was soft, quieter than a whisper, yet I heard it louder than any sound in that room. She said, "Why do you wound what only wants to heal?" The words struck me like lightning. My chest tightened, and something inside me cracked. All my bitterness, all my pride, all my mocking words, they rushed back at me like a flood. Every time I had laughed at believers, every time I had told my mother her prayers were useless, every time I had scoffed at my daughter's innocence. It all came back, crushing me, drowning me. Tears spilled from my eyes before I even realized I was crying. My throat shook with sobs I couldn't hold back. I didn't mean... I tried to speak, but my voice broke. My lips trembled. My body convulsed, as if every chain I had carried for years was finally shattering. I wept like a child, and she didn't move, she didn't flinch, she didn't turn away. She only looked at me, sorrowful, yes, but with compassion so deep it felt unbearable. In her silence, I saw every moment I had doubted, every wound I had used as an excuse, every time I had chosen pride over faith. And yet, her gaze told me none of it was final. None of it was too heavy for mercy. I buried my face into the pillow, sobbing, ashamed to even look at her. "I didn't know," I whispered, broken. I thought Faith had abandoned me." Her voice came again, soft, steady, cutting through the storm inside me. "It was never Faith that abandoned you. It was you who walked away." And still, I waited. Those words undid me completely. How could she wait for me, after all I had done, after all the years of mocking, of scoffing, of laughing at those who clung to hope? But she did. I felt her presence closer now, not walking, not stepping, but simply nearer, like the air itself, wrapped around me in warmth. My tears soaked the pillow, but for the first time, they didn't taste of bitterness. They tasted of release. I forced myself to lift my head. Through blurred vision, I saw her still standing there, clothed in light, hands open, eyes endless. And then I felt something impossible, undeniable, a touch. No hand pressed against me, no physical weight, but on my forehead, on the very place I had once bowed as a child in prayer, I felt a brush, soft, gentle, like the hand of a mother wiping away tears. My body shook, my breath caught, and the words I had resisted my entire life rose unbidden to my lips. "Forgive me." It was all I could say, over and over, through broken sobs. "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." And with every word, the chains inside me cracked louder. The years of anger, of bitterness, of mocking laughter, they shattered like brittle glass. For the first time in decades, I felt lighter. I don't know how long it lasted. Minutes, hours. It felt like eternity wrapped in a single heartbeat. But slowly, the glow began to fade. The fragrance of roses lingered, but her figure softened, dimmed, until she was gone. Gone. But not gone, because she had left something behind. Not an object, not a sign. Something deeper. Peace. Real peace. I lay there in silence, my tears still wet on my cheeks, my chest heaving, but my heart quiet for the first time in years. I whispered into the stillness of the room, not to myself, but to her. I knew someone was there. And in that moment, I understood. She hadn't come to condemn me. She hadn't come to argue or prove anything. She had come to heal what I had spent a lifetime wounding. The bitterness that had been my shield was gone. The emptiness I had carried like armor was pierced, and in its place was something I had forgotten long ago. Mercy. I wept until sleep finally took me, and even in my dreams I felt her presence linger. Not demanding, not accusing, just waiting. Waiting for me to finally say yes. I woke with a jolt, as if I had been pulled from the depths of water. My chest heaved, my skin damp with sweat, and the pillow beneath me was still wet with the tears I had shed in my vision. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and for a long moment I couldn't tell whether I was alive, dreaming, or already on the other side of death. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of the monitors, their steady beeps keeping time with my heartbeat. But the silence, oh, the silence was different. It wasn't the cold, sterile quiet of a hospital night. It was warm, alive, and full, as though the very air had changed, I turned my head slowly toward the corner of the room, afraid of what I might or might not see. And there it was, a faint light. Not from the machines, not from the hallway. It was softer, warmer, hovering like a presence. My rational mind fought back immediately. It's just exhaustion. It's just the medication. You're imagining it. But my heart knew better, because in that faint light, I saw the shape, the familiar outline, the gentle curve of a woman's form, hands clasped, head bowed. The statue, the same Virgin Mary statue that had always stood in the hospital chapel downstairs. But here in my room, it seemed alive, not moving, not speaking, but glowing faintly, as if touched by something unseen. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, even turned my head away to break the illusion. But when I looked back, it was still there. My throat tightened. My breath came in sharp, shaky pulls. The bitterness I had carried for years rose up again, trying to convince me to dismiss it, to call it nothing, to cling to my pride. But something deeper broke through. I whispered, voice trembling, "If you are real, don't leave me as I am." The words cracked as they left my lips, awkward and halting. I hadn't prayed in decades. My tongue felt heavy, clumsy, like trying to speak a language I had long forgotten. I didn't know the right words. I didn't know the right posture. All I knew was that for the first time in years, I wanted to speak. And so I did. I prayed. Not long prayers, not polished ones, just raw, broken words, spilling out of me like water from a fractured jar. Forgive me. Help me. Stay with me. Each word felt like fire burning through the chains still wrapped around my heart. I whispered into the silence, unsure if anyone was listening, yet more certain than I had ever been that I wasn't speaking into emptiness. I thought of my daughter's voice earlier that night. She hears us. Maybe she was right. Maybe all those years I had mocked prayer, someone had been listening anyway. Tears welled up again, hot and heavy, blurring my vision, until the faint glow in the corner became a soft haze of light. And in that haze, for just a moment, I swore I saw her eyes again. Those deep, compassionate eyes that had undone me in the vision. I pressed my hand weakly to my chest. My heart beat hard, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in decades, hope. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't miraculous healing. I didn't leap out of bed cured. My body was still weak, my breath still labored. But my soul felt different, lighter, freed. For the first time since I was a boy, I didn't feel abandoned. I kept whispering over and over, "Don't leave me as I am." Because I knew the man I had been, bitter, mocking, proud, could not survive this. He had to die here, in this bed, so that something new could live. The glow lingered as I prayed, my halting words filling the room like fragile offerings. And though I never heard a reply in that moment, I felt one. Not in sound, but in presence. A warmth in my chest. A peace pressing gently against my ribs. A stillness that said, "I hear you." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. My voice grew hoarse, my body exhausted. But I didn't want to stop. For the first time in decades, I didn't want to stop. Eventually, sleep overtook me again. But it wasn't the restless, suffocating sleep of bitterness and fear. It was quiet, calm, the kind of rest I hadn't known in years. When morning came, the glow was gone. Nurses bustled in, adjusting tubes and charts. My family stirred in their chairs, bleary-eyed but faithful. To them, it was just another day in the hospital. But to me, it was a new beginning, because that night, in the stillness of 3:33 a.m., I had prayed again. And though my body was still weak, my heart was no longer the same. I didn't just believe that someone had been there, I knew it, and I whispered it to myself once more as the sun rose faintly through the hospital blinds. If you are real, don't leave me as I am. And for the first time in decades, I knew he wouldn't. The morning after that night was different. I don't mean the sun rose in some unusual way or the nurses acted differently. No, the difference was inside me. Something had shifted, something I couldn't deny. The heaviness that had lived in my chest for decades wasn't there anymore. The bitterness that had been my shield, my armor, was gone. I woke to the sound of machines beeping steadily, the light filtering through the hospital blinds. My body still ached. My illness hadn't vanished. And yet, I felt lighter, freer. For the first time in so long, I felt alive. The nurse who checked my vitals furrowed her brow, looked at the screen again, and then back at me. "Your numbers are improving," she said softly, almost to herself. "That's unexpected." She didn't linger on it, but I did, because I knew what had happened. I knew what I had seen. I knew who had been there. That day, my family came into the room, bleary-eyed, tired from another night on hard hospital chairs. They expected to see the same bitter man, the same stubborn father, the same hopeless patient. But when they looked at me, they paused. My daughter was the first to notice. She came close to my bed, her small hand brushing mine. "Baba, you're smiling." I hadn't even realized I was, but I was. A faint, weary smile, yes, but real. "I had a dream," I told her, though I knew it was more than a dream. My voice cracked. She came. My mother's eyes widened, her lips trembling. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. She simply pressed her beads to her chest, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, I let her pray over me without interruption. No mockery, no scoffing. I even joined her, haltingly, awkwardly, whispering the simplest words. "Thank you." The days that followed brought small but undeniable changes. My strength, though fragile, began to return. The doctors couldn't explain it. They said, "It doesn't make sense. We were preparing for the worst, and yet your body is stabilizing." They chalked it up to anomalies, outliers, unpredictable responses. But I knew. Deep inside, I knew. Each day, I prayed again. Not long prayers, not polished ones, just simple words, whispered into the quiet. "Forgive me. Stay with me. Don't leave me as I am." And each day, I felt the chains inside me grow weaker until they were gone completely. I began to see things differently. The same hospital walls that had felt like a prison now felt like shelter. The same beeping machines that had reminded me of death now sounded like a rhythm of mercy, giving me another chance with each beat. Even the faces of strangers, nurses, janitors, visitors, looked different to me. Softer, more precious. I realized something I had never understood before. Life itself was mercy. Every breath, every heartbeat was mercy. And I was no longer the same man. I had spent decades mocking faith, calling it weakness, ridiculing those who prayed. I thought I was strong because I rejected what I could not see. But the truth, I was the weakest of all. Because I was too afraid to hope, too afraid to trust. But that night, that encounter, tore down my walls. I thought faith had abandoned me, but it was me who had abandoned faith. And in my darkest hour, mercy came for me anyway. That thought still brings me to tears, because I didn't deserve it. I didn't earn it. I had spent years running, hiding, mocking, and still, mercy found me. The change wasn't only in me, it rippled outward. My family noticed first. My daughter no longer saw the bitter father who scoffed at her prayers. She saw a man who bowed his head with hers, who held her hand, who whispered gratitude instead of anger. My mother's tears turned from sorrow to joy. For years, she had prayed silently for me, even when I told her to stop, even when I laughed at her. She never gave up. And when she saw me finally praying again, she said, "I knew he would not let you go." Even the doctors noticed. They couldn't explain my steady recovery. They told me stories of patients who gave up, who lost hope, and how quickly their bodies followed. But they looked at me now, fragile, yes, but alive, and they admitted there was something different. One of them even whispered, almost embarrassed, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I knew what I was doing. I was finally saying yes. But here is what I must confess most of all. The change wasn't just in my health. It was in my soul. The anger that had driven me was gone. The emptiness that had haunted me was filled. The mocking laughter I once threw at others now felt like a wound I had inflicted on myself. I was not healed completely in body, but I was healed where it mattered most. And so I speak now, not as the bitter skeptic I once was, but as a man who has seen mercy with his own eyes. A man who has felt the presence of the mother, who does not abandon even the most stubborn child. A man who knows, beyond doubt, that grace comes when we least deserve it. I am not the same. I will never be the same. To anyone who hears my story, I say this: don't wait until the edge of life to open your heart. Don't wait until the machines are beeping out your final hours to say the words I was too proud to say. Forgive me. Stay with me. Don't leave me as I am, because mercy waits for you, always. And so I leave you with this truth. I thought faith had abandoned me, but it was me who had abandoned faith. And in my darkest hour, mercy came for me anyway. If my story touched you, don't leave it here. Share it, because the world needs to remember that even doubt can lead to grace.